And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Darren Ninnis. I'm the National Recruiting and Retention Manager for Civil Air Patrol. This evening, we'll be hosting a webinar on how to use STEM fairs and harnessing the power of STEM for Civil Air Patrol recruiting. So with me tonight is Major Steve Aaron from Pennsylvania Wing, who has written an outstanding STEM fair guide, 10 steps to running your own STEM fair there. And so Steve's with me tonight. Steve, say hello to everybody.
Good evening, everybody.
So in the interest of time, we're going to get things rocking and rolling now. If you're using YouTube, you're going to see on your YouTube on the right there's a chat window. If you have any questions during the presentation, please put them in the chat window. I'm going to be monitoring that, and we will I'll interrupt Steve if I have to. So Steve, please go right ahead and start.
Yes, I want to thank Colonel Ninnis for inviting me to be on the call tonight. We've kind of dumbed into this, lucked into this idea a little bit early on, but I guess I'll start. He did introduce me, Major Steve Aaron. I'm from Pennsylvania Wing. I've served as a commander here for 4.5 years, and I'm working at the group level now, doing some other things. So basically, while I was commander is whenever some of the issues with STEM or some of the ideas of STEM came up and we started using it. And just to give you a little background on me, I guess, before I get started, I'm a third generation small business, manufacturing and retail business owner. And so over the course of 50, 60 years, a lot of things have changed in our society. And for small businesses to stay relevant, we've had to learn to recognize and adapt to changing things in our culture, the world around us, changing values. Basically, the idea, and a lot of you probably know this as well, doing more with less. And so that's kind of what the approach that I've taken. And I know it's shaped the way that I look at managing a squadron, trying to grow a squadron, kind of like I would a small business. And so some of the things where this came from is a lot of times I guess I should jump over into my PowerPoint as well. I've got some slides to go along with this tonight. Kind of forgetting about that. Give me 1 second until I flip over to that.
It always takes a minute, it's like you're always like, hey, I got this great thing, and then, oh, there's people watching me. It's a great thing, but until you do it, then you're like, ah.
All right. So give me 1 second to pull this up. You can make sure and tell me if this is working properly. I believe it is.
You are live, Steve.
Okay, good. Thank you. So anyhow, so constantly, and some of you probably, this has happened to you as well, the excuses that I hear constantly whenever we talk to our units about they're struggling to grow, and we say, what's going on, how can you grow, and usually the two excuses that we hear the most, I'm gonna see if I can get this to work for me. There we go. Two excuses that we hear the most from units that are struggling, and some of you, I'm sure, are looking at this saying, yeah, that's right. Seniors are stretched too thin, or there are too many sports or activities competing with CAP. So, I've heard those things, and whenever I hear that, basically what I hear is, it's not my fault and it can't be helped. And, I guess that's true to some extent. I like this quote from Mark Twain. It says, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And so as I hear that, it's basically saying sometimes we believe our own story, that it's nothing we can do about it and it's not our fault. And even though there are circumstances that are beyond our control, but there are things that we can do on our end to try and counter that, if we're honest with ourselves. And so that's kind of the concept here for looking at things a little bit differently, maybe changing the perspective that we have on recruiting and retention. So what I saw as a challenge is building and growing, promoting our units with limited personnel and resources, and doing so in a competitive environment. When I say competitive, meaning lots of other things pulling at us for our time and our energy and our resources. So I saw that as a big challenge. And so the simple solution, but always not so easy, of course, is we just need, and this is the answer that I would give people whenever they would say that there are too many sports or activities competing. As I said, you've just got to make yourself more valuable. And we have to let people help them to realize that CAP is more rewarding and more valuable. And if it's not, then that's our problem. Then we need to work hard to make it more valuable and more rewarding, which is a challenge in and of itself. So, but I look at the facts. CAP is definitely a life-altering program, has benefits, outstanding benefits for our youth and adults. All the programs and things that CAP does for us, we've seen the fruit of that in the lives of cadets and even in seniors for that matter. But still, CAP continues to be one of America's best kept secrets, sadly. So most people still, in my opinion, it seems like a lot of people, if not most, still have no idea who we are, what we do, how we're making a difference in the lives of our membership and the lives of our communities. And so the fact number 3, which I think is the big one, is that perception is reality. So that's our challenge. To continue to grow in a competitive environment, we need to promote our unique advantages and opportunities in the creative and interactive ways that alter the current perceptions of CAP. And so how do we do this, right? That's the big question. So what I start with is that we have to increase our perceived value. And this is where I'm coming back around to STEM, and some of you can kind of already beat me there probably. But we have to show that there's some value beyond what people perceive in our organization. And then not only do we have to increase our perceived value, but how about our actual value? Sometimes we're not doing the things that we need to be valuable enough. So we need to be continuing to do that. So although we certainly always need to be improving our product, I'll call our organization or our, the CAP mission, our product, for lack of a better word, but though we need to be improving our product, I don't believe that we primarily have a product challenge so much as we do a packaging and delivery challenge, which is really what, recruiting and retention is all about. And so that's where I think STEM can jump in and help us kind of be the vehicle, if you will, to help us to pull this all together and to be effective. So real quickly, just to give you an overview of where this came from, when I was a squadron commander, our unit, obviously we have these, things called the fifth meeting of the month, right? And we did a lot of different STEM programs, different STEM activities that National graciously had worked with the Air Force to provide for us. And when we came up on one of these months, we asked our cadets, what do you all want to do on the 5th week? And this was about 3 years ago. And they all said, can we do a STEM night? Can we have a STEM night and hook up the flight simulators, just all the different STEM kits, mini drones, things of that nature? And we said, absolutely, we can do that. And then one of them said something that I'm glad they said, can we invite our friends? And as a commander and as a small business owner who is used to doing marketing, I said, wow, yes, not only can you bring your friends, but I'm going to insist on it. And I said, let's make this a great, fun event. And so at that point, the cadets got extremely excited. And to me, that's the most important part of this, is getting them excited and empowered to do what they're doing. I guess I should flip through here. I have a few pictures to show you from the STEM fair that we ended up doing. So we decided, rather than having an open house, to have an open house. But rather than calling it an open house, we more or less called it a STEM fair, and decided that we were just going to make it a community-wide event to help us to be able to promote it more strongly, within the media, within Facebook, things of that nature. And the cadets were extremely excited about this. So we started dividing up some of the different stations and asking them to come up with ideas. Giving some oversight, but challenging them to come up with the ideas for some of the different STEM stations, as we called them, so that it could be a very practical night. It wasn't going to be something that was information-based only, but it was going to be hands-on and practical. And so certainly we did the STEM kits. You can see we brought in a CAP airplane. We had some drones in. We actually had drones in a classroom with a little course for them to try and fly through, and awards for winning that. Things of that nature. But what was amazing is we had hoped for a half-decent turnout, and we don't live in a large area. I think there's probably 5,000 people in the town of Clarion, and within our county, I'm trying to think whether I can't remember, but it's not a large area. But that evening we had over 250 people come through, and really Facebook, social media was huge. And as we promoted this, and as the kids got excited, the cadets, and they shared that with their families and with their friends, it got into the schools, and everyone got excited about it. And so there was a lot of good mojo happening in the midst of that. And so Stat Medevac, get them involved. So we were partnering with some outside organizations as well. And it really just caused a stir and a lot of excitement in the community. And that's really what it was all about, because sometimes I think we approach our recruiting and retention like we have to sit and forcefully be sitting there with a recruitment paper recruiting. And really, we kind of took the opposite approach, where we were going to build the foundation upon which the recruiting happens naturally, and really helping people just to see what they're missing in CAP, changing their perception of who we are and what we do, and the types of activities that their young people could be involved in. So trying to stay with my notes a little bit here. But so what was amazing to us afterwards, as we did this, number one, we were stunned whenever we had people started arriving an hour before the event was to start, and we weren't even completely set up yet. So we were just blown out of the water, which maybe we should have realized would happen, but we really didn't. And so after the first event, we realized that in this one event, we were able to incorporate internal and external aerospace, STEM and cyber, ES, leadership and mentoring, community service, networking with other organizations in our community, public affairs, recruiting and retention. All these things happen through one event. And, for us, that was huge, because I think probably most squadrons, I could be wrong, but most squadrons really, I think, struggle with, one or two or three or four, a handful of members holding multiple duty assignments, and really struggling with have the time to be able to do multiple activities and multiple duties, whereas this was kind of brought them all together into one event, so that we were able to really be more efficient with our time and with our resources to pull off this kind of event. So what we really learned in the midst of that was that the packaging of our event, which was really what I see as the draw of the STEM, throwing that idea and that topic out there, opened up new avenues to the public. Whenever we'd done open houses in the past, and not that those are wrong, but there's only certain types of people that you're going to draw off of an open house and what their perception of who the Civil Air Patrol is. Whenever we used the topic of STEM, that changed the way a lot of people looked at it, or at least opened up people's eyes to that. And we literally had people from 4 years old to 99. We had some people that were in their either late 80s or early 90s that they came because they had always wanted to fly a plane, and they came and wanted to fly our flight simulators that night. And so it was just an awful lot of fun. And the cadets worked these stations and interacted with the public in a way that really drew attention to them. So the packaging opened up new avenues. And then what I call the delivery system was the interactiveness of this STEM fair. It wasn't really a seminar. It wasn't just talking to people about what we did, but we made this a fun and interactive night, which made it empowering for our cadets and for our seniors, for that matter, as they each had responsibilities where they were able to have some autonomy and develop something on their own to be able to bring to the table that night, to contribute. Gave them a job, as sometimes even with seniors, we always say people need to have purpose, and they need to have a job, and this gave them a purpose for that evening and something to really look forward to. And then it was engaging, in the midst of that, to all of our members. So a lot of excitement throughout the night. So our program, who we were didn't really change, in the midst of that, but we delivered the product or service to the public in a way that caught their attention and their interest. So that's what was really something fun that we learned about that. So, with that in mind, we talk about the opportunities, for STEM. There's lots of ways. I know we use the STEM fair concept, and I talked to Lieutenant Colonel Ninnis about this, that, there are so many other avenues where STEM can be utilized, and this was just one that we used, the open house, but there's festivals, there's parades, incorporating ELTs, or technology touches everything that we do pretty much in CAP. So anytime we're involved in most activities, especially if it's a public event or even service, we can tie in some of the STEM aspects of what we're doing, which always causes people to ask questions. And really, it surprises them. They don't realize that those are the types of things that we're involved in. National Night Out was one that Lieutenant Colonel Ninnis mentioned to me. And I thought that was a great idea. We don't do that in my local community, but I looked into that and I thought, what a great event to be involved in, and to do some of these kinds of things, set up some displays and have some interactive events in those regards. And even in the school presentations, you know, rather than sitting there, brochures and information are helpful, but I think a lot of times we lean on those as a crutch, and rather than using them to supplement what we're showcasing, we use that as our primary means of conveying who we are and what we do. And I just think, you know, in this day and age, we're a sight and sound generation, that it's extremely important that we make things hands-on and fun for our cadets. I mean, that's what they want anyhow for their own meetings, but even whenever we promote things for the public, I think that's where we need to go.
Steve, you've got a good point here. Interestingly, you know, there was a squadron recently in California. There had been an unfortunate incident where one of our 182s flipped over on landing, and they had this, you know, kind of remainder of this aircraft sitting there, and they actually turned that thing into a flight simulator in conjunction with the local JROTC unit and some community partners. Yeah. And then they brought that to a I think it was the San Diego County Fair, and this wound up being an opportunity to turn, you know, kind of an unhappy thing. You know, we had an airplane accident, everybody walked away, no big deal, but you know, into a thing that you can now use to bring the message of Civil Air Patrol using STEM and the flight simulator out to them. So it was kind of neat. I just saw that recently. It kind of, you know, when you said county festivals, I kind of thought of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I guess that's kind of, you know, my challenge tonight to everybody to change, just, I guess, to think outside the box, that there are really opportunities all around us to incorporate STEM. I mean, there's probably other things that we can do as well, but the interesting thing about STEM is it's become a real, people realize the importance of science and technology in our culture and in the future. And so it's something that, you know, the public and school systems are very interested in. And at least in our area, budgets are so tight in our schools that they're interested, but they don't have a lot of funding for STEM activities and for STEM education. And so the more that we, you know, promote and show, hey, this is what, well, this is a big part of who we are. You know, it crosses over, you know, it introduces the topic of emergency services, you know, of our aerospace education, of our cadet programs, you know, Cyber Patriot. And as soon as they start hearing those kinds of things, you can see the look in their face that they're just totally stunned and surprised, because they thought that we just marched in parades and somehow must fly in airplanes or something. You know, you know, it's changing the way that people understand who, you know, what we're really doing for the youth in America. So, but yeah, I had to pull in this phrase to kind of maybe sort of wrap up at least this part of the presentation. My dad, my mentor in business and so forth, always likes this phrase. It's all in the wrapper. Basically understanding that a lot of times it's not so much that we're doing things differently, but it's how we present things to people that makes all the difference. And it's so true. I used the concept of the package earlier, and you know, whenever you if you have a Christmas tree and there's a large package with a big pretty bow on it, and there's another, you know, plain Jane box sitting over there without any of that, you know, which one are people typically going to be drawn toward, at least initially? It's the one that you know, catches their attention. And so you know, what we're trying to do is to harness STEM and even the way that we present and gets information out to people to make them excited and interested, curious about what we're doing, rather than just taking a, you know, I guess kind of a standard approach that after a while it just kind of you know, sounds like background noise to people. And so always trying to change things up. And right now, you know, this season may pass. So to me, it's real important. I'm trying to encourage people to utilize STEM as much as they can, because it's hard to say there, you know, this may kind of pass, but for now, it's something that really catches people's attention and interests them greatly. And young people love it. That's the big thing. And so, you know, we definitely have gotten recruits from doing it. But what I've seen as well, it really interests young people, say 9 to 11-year-olds. And so in one respect, it gives them a taste of this to where they can look forward to joining in a year. We've had a lot of people that they say, I'm 11, but I'll be 12 in 8 months. And, we say, well, come back and visit us, And, when they get to that age, that's when some of these other activities do start vying for their attention. And so this gives them something to see ahead of time so that we don't kind of come in on the backside and have a big disadvantage of not being there first. So that's kind of my formal presentation. I don't know, is there any questions from anyone? I like I said, we did put together like a 10-step guide, talked about all kinds of ways that we network with the community. I know a local squadron just had one as well, and they had 200 to 300 people come through again here recently, and they partnered with local search and rescue operations. It's up in the mountainous area, and there's some teams up there. I think they may have had a bucket truck from a fire company come in. They kind of approached it more, kind of trying to tie in the approach of Civil Air Patrol being a force multiplier, and brought in a few of the organizations that we do work with and partner with. And in that, I talk about this in that 10-step guide, but sometimes your just brand association is important to where we align ourselves. Maybe it's with a university. One of our local units brought in Carnegie Mellon University, a couple of their teams that have some unique physics presentations, and they did that. We've had astronomy. We've worked with a couple of places that have the planetarium, have those people. If we're a little weak in astronomy, we see if there's a local university that would send someone in to talk about astronomy as part of this. And so really just trying to really not be afraid to partner with some other people in this. We certainly don't want to be dwarfed by them, but partnering with them is a positive thing and something that we've tried not to be afraid of. And it's worked really well because it brings some brand recognition then to the Civil Air Patrol.
Steve, I think that's great. You talked earlier about, bringing value to the whole thing and how we can show our value. I've been doing recruiting a long time, and I've seen a lot of people, they get up and they do a recruiting presentation of like, hi, we're Civil Air Patrol, Aerospace Education, Emergency Services Cadet Programs. They sit down, and people kind of go, okay, what does that mean?
Right.
So, when they see that, when people say that kind of thing, it's like, all right, aerospace education, what does that mean? What does that encompass? And our cadet program is really very involved and exciting, and there's a lot to it. So try to explain that in like, a minute. Good luck, right? It's right. Like you're not going to do that in a minute. And the same thing goes with emergency services and aerospace education. We could talk, people do this all the time. They talk about the what. They go, oh, well, we have an internal program and we have an external program and we do this and we do that and we do this and we do that. That's great. But let's show them what we do. Let's show them how it gets done. So that's, I think, important because a lot of people, that brings you that value proposition. And I talk about this in a lot of my recruiting presentations. Explain the value of Civil Air Patrol. And you kind of alluded to this earlier. How can you be competitive in the with all the things that are going on in the world, sports and drama and school and 7 other clubs and that sort of thing. Well, if you can explain what the value proposition of Civil Air Patrol is and how it's going to be good for, your son or daughter, then moms and dads grasp that intuitively. If you put in front of them, you say, look, we flight simulators. Hey, look, drones. Hey, look, I'm trying to think of what the other STEM kits are, but, robotics. Hey, Cyber Patriot. Moms and dads start to go, our cadet program can be a little, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is exactly, but it can be a little abstract.
Yes.
You talk about the cadet program and leadership and aerospace and activities, and moms and dads just they can't wrap their arms entirely around exactly what it is you're talking about. But when you talk about aerospace and STEM and they go, oh, flight simulator. Oh, okay, cool. Like, I got that. So that's where this is a good thing. So
Right. No, I agree, because that's an important point that, even I go back to sales because that's what I do. But, in the first 5 to 10 minutes, people decide whether or not you're genuine, whether or not you're enjoying what you're doing. And it's the same thing, I think, with our, these types of events. Sometimes we overwhelm them with information because we think that this is helping them to really understand who we are, but it really is just kind of overwhelms them. But if we're doing something and there's activities, then they see within a few minutes, they can tell whether or not this is an exciting program. They may not know everything about it, but they can tell whether or not it's making a difference in these kids' lives. Are they respectful? Are they, how they interact with one another? All those types of things. We're able to showcase that part of our program. And really, like I said, within 10, 15 minutes, they're ready to hear more, or they're not concerned about it. They're going to come back another week to hear the next part.
Sure, absolutely. And I guess that's kind of my thing too, is, you lead, put your best foot forward, lead with your best thing. If you've only got a short period of time, when we talk about the elevator pitch, and in a way, this is sort of like a super elevator pitch. You've only got a real finite amount of time in which to engage people. When we do the recruiting boot camp at the national conference, people, they come along and they go, oh, all right, I'll do my recruiting pitch. And we simulate it being in an elevator, and they go, and Civil Air Patrol in 1941, and we have airplanes, and we do, and 4 missions, and 3 missions. I mean, and they kind of do this like what, and it's like, this is, I don't know, we're not going to tell you what, we're going to show you what, and this is the opportunity to put that best foot forward once and quickly,
right.
And I think that's important. I just went to a squadron open house last weekend, and they had 3 tables in a room, and they had those little trifold, Elmer's, like science fair things kind of, and they didn't look good. And I remember thinking, guys, put your best foot forward, put your best presentation out here. If you're going to do an aerospace thing, have your drones, have your gliders, have your robotics kit, have your simulator set up. If you're going to do if you want to talk about emergency services, then you're going to have your Hawk Mountain guys standing there because they're your subject matter experts. But don't stand there and talk about it. Don't talk about, oh, well, we do this and we do that. Show it.
Right.
So.
Right. It's amazing too what creativity people have. A lot of times we're kind of boxed in by the way we think ourselves. But I've been amazed every time there's this, one of our units in the area or in Pennsylvania does a STEM fair. If I attend, there's always something new that they've come up with that is really, amazing and engaging for people. And so those are the things that I, make sure you're sharing those kinds of ideas with others. That's why we've tried. I didn't have very many pictures in the slideshow there tonight, but I try to take pictures of some of the unique things just because it throws ideas out there. And I know a local commander recently, whenever I went to talk to him about his STEM fair that was highly successful, he almost apologized because he did some things differently than what some of the recommendations were within the STEM guide that I had put out for PA Wing. And I said, don't apologize, because and you mentioned this earlier, it's meant to be fairly basic, because a lot of these things, every area is different. The interests of people in certain areas is going to differ. The one I was telling you about, the search and rescue, they may have had 4-wheelers out there. They're up in the mountains somewhere. That's going to attract a whole different type of people, and the type of STEM, stations, if you will, or the events that they have at their recruiting event is going to look different than one that's in the inner city somewhere. So that's what's interesting about it, is allowing your creativity to take those different ideas and apply them in a way that makes sense.
Absolutely.
In your area.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important for units also to, and you kind of alluded to that, is sell the Civil Air Patrol you have, not the Civil Air Patrol you want to have, or sort of tell people what's in front of them. For many years, our presentation included all this stuff about the cadet program, and you can do all these National Cadet Special Activities, and you can go to Hawk Mountain, and then you could go on the International Air Cadet Exchange. But like, oops, I went a lot of focus there. Basically, that's something for second year, third year, even fourth year cadets, not the cadet who's going to join and participate over the next 12 months. What he's going to see is summer encampment and, unit activities and orientation flights and some things like that. And we talk about those things to make sure that we're selling those things that are directly in front of that cadet. And yeah, we do tell them, oh, by the way, there are these things down the road, but you got to do these things first. We're very clear with that, because all too often somebody gets the idea, oh, I'm going to join Civil Air Patrol today, and I'm going to be involved in this emergency services thing, and tomorrow I'm going to be out on the mountain saving people, right?
Right.
It's like, yeah, no, not exactly.
Right. Right. That kind of goes back to that idea of make sure you deliver what you're selling.
Right.
And I think a lot of times we like to make things sound, you don't need to make things sound better than they are. Just like you said, put your best foot forward and sell what you do have that's valuable. And like I said, people are not just looking, obviously the program's important, the actual value, as I said, but the perceived value is just a lot of that, of just seeing what it's doing in our young people and in their lives and so forth. So that's all just as important.
Yeah, that's great. And one of the things I wanted to bring up as it relates to this, because I'm always trying to think of these things. And, when I talked to Colonel Fleming first about this a little over a year ago, he mentioned, the STEM fair concept and said, hey, we've stopped doing open houses and we've started doing STEM fairs in Pennsylvania. And I'll be completely honest. I was a little skeptical initially. My eyebrow kind of shot up and I said, really? And then he explained it further, and it was like a light bulb went off over my head. I was like, holy smokes, this is really, there's something about this here that's really, there's something here. And particularly when he was explaining, hey, we get all these people to these events and they come in and they're all interested in this stuff. And I'm thinking, I don't want to call it a bait and switch, because that's not what it is, but it's almost like, hi, come on in here for the STEM thing. Pay no attention to these Civil Air Patrol guys, but you can ask us about them, or something. And the other thing that I think about is because it's engaging your aerospace education members, you could even engage your area if you have aerospace education members in the area. Of course, you're reaching out to teachers and schools and saying, hey, by the way, STEM opportunity here, schools. So now, I hear from units all the time, it's, oh, we don't have any luck getting into the schools. Well, that's because, you've gone in with this sort of frontal assault of recruiting. Hey, we're here to recruit for Civil Air Patrol. Whereas, maybe it's like, hey, we're from Civil Air Patrol. Would you be interested in our STEM subjects? And people goes, STEM, that's a hot topic right now. Let's do that, and versus come be recruited by us. So that's a good message, I think, is a good opportunity to tell people, to show what the organization is. Some of them are going to say, hey, that's for me. Some of them are going to say, not interested, but I was really interested in that flight sim. Thanks a lot.
Right, absolutely. And that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because I didn't really get into detail about the STEM fairs, but one of our stations is a kind of a recruitment table where we do have information about who we are, and because people do want to know, and we don't push it hard. A lot of people will browse over there, but we have floating recruiters, I call them, and they're people who are a little more experienced, so they're able to do that. They're making conversation with parents who are sitting back with a cup of coffee, watching their son or daughter. You introduce yourself, you talk to them about who they are. You can get, pretty soon you're finding out whether or not there's a level of interest there or not. And so, yeah, you're right. It's not really bait and switch, but like I said, it's opening the door to people who normally, like I said, even like the schools, they have a perception of who Civil Air Patrol is as well. And whenever we come in and say, hey, we want to share this with you, they kind of don't know how to take that because they're surprised. And what's great is cadets, young people, they love that. They love to share what they have. And so even though they are recruiting, even if they're not signing people up, they loved, everybody loves to talk about what is fun to them and what's important to them, and so it gives them a chance to showcase and to show people who we are and what we do. And even if it's not formal, in your face type of recruiting, it's something that they get excited about. And that makes a huge difference. Whenever other young people see these cadets who are excited and they hear about and see some of the things that are happening, recruiting, I don't want to say it takes care of itself. You have to follow up. You can't be, negligent in what you do. So I know some of the people have had a sign-up process or like a check-in at the door for the STEM fairs, which helps to give them some contact information where you can just kind of thank people for coming. And one thing that I didn't think to mention, we've toyed with the idea of doing a Great Start weekend about 2 weeks, 3 weeks following the STEM fairs, and in conjunction with it. And that way, if people act interested, you can say, hey, you know what? If you're interested, come back, because here in a few weeks is a great time to join, because we're going to be, having a new, it's called the Great Start program, where cadets who are new joining, kind of can shoot through some of the early aspects a little more quickly. And that gives them another little push if they just need, some people just need a little push. They really want to do it, but they need someone to give them a reason, another reason why to. And so that's another thought.
Sure. And that, I'll put a plug in for it here, but that's exactly what cohort recruiting is all about. When we talk about pipelining or cohort recruiting versus the trickle-in method, if you say, hey, if you're that interested in Civil Air Patrol, in 2 weeks, we've got this going on. Now this is an opportunity to take not just one guy this week or one girl next week or 2 girls the week after that, but 4 or 5 or 5 or 6 interested people all at once, and train them all at once so that they're a group, and you're maximizing your training resources. You're using your training resources. I mean, how inefficient is it for one person to train one person, right? And so you've got now you can say, yeah, exactly. Hey, we're going to be starting a Great Start in 2 weeks. Do you want to get involved? Perfect time to do so.
Right. Yeah, and the other point is like you say, otherwise we can become very fragmented in how we approach recruiting and how we approach some of our other areas. And when we come together with activities and events like this, it helps to kind of be more cohesive. And it really is much more efficient and better use of our time and resources, even in the training aspects, like you said. So yeah,
absolutely. And I do want to point out, number 9 in your guide is refreshments. And,
yes.
and I joke around about this, and I tell people all the time, whether you're running an open house or any kind of a recruiting event, the max. My thing is the maximum effective range of recruiting is 1 meter. Everything beyond 1 meter is advertising. So how do you get moms and dads and potential cadets within that 1 meter space, which is an arm's length, where you're standing there chatting with them and talking to them and giving them the elevator pitch or whatever? Well, with a cup of punch and a cookie in your hand is probably one of the best ways to do it. And that's what we do after we've done some of the formal aspects of our open house events. There's the refreshment table. Have some cookies, have some punch, have some donuts, whatever. Some apple cider. One year we did like a fall theme, and that was really great because people were like, "Oh, food! Yeah, I'll stick around for food." Well,
right.
What's right? The way to them is right through their stomach, right?
Right. We have people that stay all night essentially, and like I said, parents will stay a lot longer if they can do that as well. But you're right. My home unit. We're actually, it's kind of funny, we're known in the area, certainly within CAP circles, that if they're having an event, don't worry, you're going to have good food. And what we do is ask the parents, and it works out really well. We just say, hey, with all the parents, and they have a sign-up sheet, and it doesn't really add that much more. Obviously, there's someone within the unit that helps to facilitate it a little bit, but all the parents, it's kind of potluck is kind of what it's like. And they all bring something, and honestly, it's always great food, crock pot, finger foods, desserts, and and honestly, you usually are starting earlier in the evening that the cadets enjoy some food too. And it sounds funny, but you're right. I would never do it without having that as part of the evening.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, it's funny, but my unit, we have one of our lieutenants, the commander's wife, actually. She said, hey, look, I want to coordinate this. I want to coordinate the food aspect. And I was like, when I was the commander, I was like, okay, yeah, knock yourself out, And so she did, because she said, kind of, we would make it a free for all, and then we wind up with like 14 bottles or 2 liters of soda and 7 bags of chips. And yeah, A,
Right.
not healthy, B, not the greatest food, that kind of thing.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah, because each parent then wants to bring something that will be interesting and good. And so you're right. You're right. It's amazing how much recruiting can be done around that table.
Sure. So any other questions? I want to double check, make sure we got any questions in the chat window here. We haven't really had any questions. I did paste a link to the how-to guide in there. So we had some folks online. We had about 5 people watching live earlier. Now we're down. Oh, we're back up to 4. So it looks like our numbers are fluctuating a little bit. So, but if anybody's got any questions, please type them into the chat window to the right of the YouTube window. I'm going to point to the right, and I know that it's not going to be the right side, but I think it's this side. This is where
good.
It's backwards, and I can't get my hands to go that way. So, yeah, I did point that way. Anyway, but if nobody's got any questions, I don't want to extend this any further. I mean, Steve, I think that your presentation was pretty excellent tonight. We did some. You had some really good points, and I mean, it really opens up some different ideas, some different ways to do it. Second verse, same as the first, or if you do it the same way you've always done it, you're going to get the results you always got. So how do we, find a different way? How do we approach this from a different mousetrap kind of perspective? And that's, I think, the STEM fair concept is really, that's one other tool in your toolbox, or
Right.
arrow in your quiver, So.
Yeah, I think you got to just not get kind of locked into one way of always doing things and expect that 5 years from now we're going to be able to do things the same way, and it's going to be as effective. What's effective today may not be effective a year from now. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, all right, well, I'm going to wrap this up. Steve, I really appreciate your time tonight. And I want to thank everybody who is watching live for watching. Please, I'm going to include some links in the description below. I don't do that YouTube thing real good yet, but in the description below, I'll include some links to our previous presentations, and also to the guide, the how-to guide for how to do a STEM fair. And we'll look forward to potentially seeing everybody here next month. We're going to have a presentation, working on a couple of different ideas, but next month we're going to work on a slightly different presentation. So thanks everybody for watching, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.